Fellow actors, writers, directors, and production crew, welcome to Small Talk with Tony, an interview series where we sit down with people in the biz to make small talk. I'm your host, the owner, chief storyteller, and the Tony behind Tony Video. Now, over the course of this series, you will hear stories and personal experiences from people just like you. So, let's make some small talk.
Actions always find a way to shine brighter than the things you say.
So, today's guest is the beautifully talented Camilla Maxwell. Camilla is a writer, theater director, actor, and is originally from Australia and currently resides in Western New York. She is a graduate of the Macquarie Academy in Sydney and has a Bachelor's of Media in Writing. She's a former company member of the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and is a resident playwright at Mind the Gap Theater in New York City. I've had the pleasure of being directed by Camilla in First Look Buffalo's 10-minute play festival, Halloween. So, it brings me great pleasure to introduce my next guest. Camilla, thank you so much for taking the time for some small talk.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, Camilla, you have quite the resume and a lot of different experiences you could talk about, but let's start with the beginning. Tell us about your journey and where it all began for you.
Well, I come from a family of performers. My dad is an Elvis impersonator, and he's a part-time lawyer, part-time Elvis impersonator. From a young age, he was performing, so he kind of thrust us all into it. So I started when I was about 8, and I would compete in what we call speech Eisteddfods in Australia. And then that's where I'm from, in case you didn't know. And then after that, around the age of, I want to say 10, my sister was discovered walking down the street. It was before Top Model, and she was discovered. And through that, we made a lot of connections, and I was able to start doing some extra work and featured extra work through an agency. And then I went on and got another agency, a modeling agency. And then through that, it just kind of progressed.
Okay, so you come from a family full of performers. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, I don't know if I told you this before, but I wanted to join the circus. So I spent months and months learning how to ride a unicycle, and I used to ride it everywhere. Like, I honestly was like, this is my calling in life. The circus is going to come to town. I'm going to join the circus with my one trick that I could do. That's all I could do. Couldn't juggle. And I'm going to go off and join the circus. But sadly for me, the circus never came to town, and I never got to live out that dream. So instead, I went into performing, and it's basically a circus anyway. So it's the same thing.
Well, as a matter of fact, I did not know that about you. So, me personally, I can't juggle to save my life, but by the sounds of it, it looks like you've done a lot in Australia. So talk about some of the things that, started to push you into thinking about moving to the United States.
So I continued to perform, and having a famous sister, obviously you always set your sights pretty big. I had someone to look up to. So once I started working more and more in the scene in Sydney, I just thought that there was something more for me, and I didn't quite know what it was, but I also wanted to find my own place in the industry, away from my sister and away from that, the burden of living in her shadow. Not that she ever made me feel that way, but other people did. So then I started training and working, and around when I finished school, I realized that I wanted to do it more full-time. I had been modeling all through school, and that had been great, and I'd been doing the odd occasional commercial, but I wanted to get more into the theatre. So I one day just decided, actually after a failed audition, I failed an audition for the National Institute of Dramatic Arts in Australia, and I was like, broken. I'm like, that's it, my career's over. But I went away and I had some thoughts, and I went, sometimes I have them occasionally. And I thought, well, maybe I'll move to America. Maybe that's where I should go and give it a go, you know. And where else but New York City, because that's where theater is happening, right? New York or Chicago. So that's when I made that decision.
Okay, so you're set, ready to move to the big city. What were some of the things that you did beforehand to help prepare you? And then what were some of the things that you experienced and had to deal with upon arriving?
Well, so when I decided to move to New York, my sister had already lived in New York and all across the world. So my family was very supportive. But my dad said to me, if you're going to go, you're going to do this right. Because I was like, oh, just pack a bag and see ya. Just get an agent, it'll be easy. Because it had been easy for me in Sydney having the connections that I have. So he was smart and he said, no, if you're going to do it, you need to prepare. So the first year before I went, when I was saving up to go, I did a full 1-year acting course at the Actors Centre of Australia. And that was great. And training is so important, especially in this industry, I think. I did that for a year, and I did a bunch of master classes in auditioning and all sorts of things just to get my skills ready for New York. And then I flew. Once I had my sights set on that, did get accepted into the Lee Strasberg School in New York City, but I just wasn't sure that was for me. So I decided to fly over. I flew over and I auditioned for the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. And that was an experience because Dino Scopaz, who's one of the instructors there, he was the one who did my audition. And to this day, I have no idea if he understood my accent at all. Because I remember finishing it and it was a full-on Australian accent. Not my usual accent. I really went hardcore because I do love accents. And he just was like, okay. And then I did another English accent. I think I did Lady Macbeth, actually. And I got accepted into the American Academy. And I flew home. I saved up for a year. And then I packed up my stuff and I moved with 2 suitcases and I think about $3,000 or $4,000. It was pretty stupid. And arrived in New York. But I arrived in the middle of a blizzard. And we don't have snow where I come from. So we don't have things like snow boots or snow clothes. And I got off the plane and I went, I've made a huge mistake. What the hell is going on here? I mean, it was crazy. It was so cold. And I'm walking around in Australian-style tennis shoes. So you have to imagine, what do you call them? Sneakers. And you have to imagine they're completely aerated. And I probably got hypothermia 3 or 4 times. And that's how I arrived in the Big Apple.
Well, I'm glad you made it.
Yeah.
It sounds like quite the entrance. But so you made it to New York. Talk about your experiences within your first year being in the city. What were some of the things that you discovered, and how did you get situated?
Well, the first thing I realized when I moved to the city was I found the people really welcoming. I was really lucky. I made some great friends straight off the bat through the academy, and just even on the street, New Yorkers were so friendly. Some weren't. That's a story for another time. But it's New York. It was crazy. I'm walking down the street, and you're seeing things that you should never see in your life. But it makes for amazing material when you're writing, and straight away, I feel like my creativity was amped like 2,000-3,000 points because I was seeing things which I had never seen in my life. I remember this one time I was on a bus and I was going, I think, to the Lower East Side, and I saw this little kind of Nana type lady, and she grabs this guy on the side and goes, "Excuse me, you're so tall." And I looked at her and I was like, what the hell? A, what's that accent? And B, it was just like an episode of The Nanny. Do you remember that show?
I can't say I've seen it, unfortunately.
And but it was just like an episode from TV, and I started to realize I've been watching all these TV shows like Seinfeld and The Nanny growing up, all of these American shows, thinking, wow, it's just ingenious that they come up with this stuff. And then I got to New York and I went, oh, they didn't come up with this stuff. This stuff is actually real. Like these people actually exist. So that was just such a cool eye opener for me. And then you're in New York and you're in this giant melting pot. I went to school with internationals from all over the world. I mean, my best friend is a soap star in Mexico City. And then I have friends in Italy who are directors, producers, and they all came to New York to train. So you're in this giant melting pot of culture, and you can't help but absorb that. And it starts to become part of who you are. Coming from Australia, where I knew everyone, I knew the industry, to this crazy city, which you can't even describe unless you've lived there, been there, visited them. Does that make sense?
Well, that's interesting, because you get used to something and, it becomes an expectation almost. And there's that certain comfort zone that people find themselves in, which can make them not motivated to want to continue to grow and refine themselves, whether it's acting or writing or just about anything else. But what's interesting about your experience is that even though you were put into a different environment, you already had the knowledge of the industry, which seemed to be very beneficial for your move. So, what do you think were the main things you did in Australia that helped?
Well, I think one of the most important things that I brought with me was I've always said, my religion is very simple. My religion is kindness. And I've always said that from a young age. And I think in general, Australians do tend to be quite kind and quite welcoming. And in the industry in Australia, sometimes I experienced that and sometimes I didn't because of my family, my sister. So I really tried to bring that with me, and I brought that to my work ethic. And I think that is something that is really important because we are putting ourselves out there, whether you be a writer or a director or a producer, you are putting your heart out there for people to judge and critique and love or hate. And that's a lot. Most people can't do that. So if you are in the industry, having that kindness, I think, just it's so important on so many levels because you don't know what the other person is experiencing. I think that's something I really brought with me from Australia, from my past experiences. And I do try and continue to live that daily, particularly in my professional life.
Well, that's a great way to put it. So now you're looking at your journey. You talked about working in Australia, then you talked about the city. For those that may end up working in Australia or find themselves all the way across the world, how would you describe working there and how that differs from working in New York or just the United States in general?
I think in some ways the industry is easier in Australia. I think people tend to be quite welcoming in a lot of ways, and it might be easier for you to get an agent, might be easier for you to get work. I think, though, one thing that I found working with Americans is Americans tend to be a lot more positive and outwardly positive, whereas Australians are a bit more, yeah, whatever, you're not that good. Whereas Americans, like, yeah, go you. If you succeed, I succeed. We all succeed. And I think that's something that I found a little bit different. In Australia, we call it tall poppy syndrome. And the idea is that a poppy is a type of flower. Actually, I think it's a flower that makes opium. Um, but the poppy grows, the poppy that grows the tallest is often the one that gets cut down first, is kind of the Australian mentality. So if you want to be big and flamboyant and live your dream, like being on stage or being as a writer, then you are going to be more open to criticism in Australia, I think. Whereas in America, I don't know, people tend to be a lot more open to you living your dreams and giving it ago. And so that has been my main difference that I've seen between the two countries.
I really like that metaphor. It paints a very clear picture. It's just easy to understand. And, for someone like you that has multiple facets, you're a writer, you're a director, an actor, you've done some modeling. So which one of those things resonates with you the most? And why do you think that is?
Definitely writing. Writing has always been something that's been really important to me. I like the ability to create characters. I like the ability to control a scene and a situation. And I think I'm a very observant person. So definitely when I moved to America and I started watching all these people and going, oh my God, this is amazing. I have this wealth of inspiration right here. Like, oh, but my friend always joked that I got so desensitized to some of the things in New York that I would just turn to her and go, you don't see that every day. And you didn't. And you probably shouldn't. But it made for amazing writing material. And that's really where my passion lies, in writing. And I love directing. Obviously, I got to work with you, which has been amazing. And I love being behind the scenes and being able to bring my mentality of let's be kind, let's create, we're a team, we're in this together. So I'm going to try and write something amazing for you, or I'm going to try and direct you in a way that you're going to achieve your best possible results. And that's really where my passion lies, although I do like doing everything. And I think it's really important that you should be maybe not an expert, but you should know a little bit about all the fields.
Well, having been personally directed by you, I can honestly say that you are a wonderful director. And no, I'm not just saying that.
Yeah, you are. But talk badly about me next week.
I really like what you said about doing a little bit of everything. I'm a writer myself, as well as an actor and a director, and I think you grow a greater appreciation for those other facets. You don't have to be the best in them, but for writers, I think you can write better by working with actors, directors, and even producers, because they may be able to show you something that you couldn't see without a different perspective. So for those that have multiple interests and wish to develop those skills, what do you think the biggest misconception about the industry is, and what ultimately impedes someone from progressing those varying interests?
As a writer, the biggest misconception is that you are going to just write something and people are going to want it or perform it. So does that make sense? You're going to have to continually write and rewrite and make drafts, and people are going to reject you, and it's going to hurt, and you have to look deep within yourself and go back and say, okay, this needs a rewrite. I need to be honest with myself. You also have to make things what I call writer and director, actor and director proof, because you want to put out your best product and you want to leave no holes for it to be completely fucked up. Can I say that? The biggest misconception, I think, as an actor is that you are, I don't know how to say this in a way that's not kind, that you are the only person doing that. As an actor, you need to be so respectful and so kind, because there are so many wheels and so many cogs that turn to create a show. And so some actors will come and they might not be prepared, they might not be respectful of other people. I think the misconception is that you're not replaceable, and everyone is replaceable, whether it be a writer, a director, anyone in this industry. And I think that is the biggest misconception people get. I also think it's so important to be continually working on your craft. And some people think, well, I did that one course and I'm fine. Well, yeah, you might be fine for one night, but how are you going to do that performance over and over and over again if you get a show that, say, runs for 3 or 4 months? So that's where training comes in. And I think training is so important in order to have a longer career, a more successful career. And that's the same with writing as well, and directing. You need to keep honing your craft.
Well, I think that applies to everyone, you know? Just the more you do it, the better you become. And it takes time, and to some people it comes naturally, but all you have to do is just keep working on it. So you're currently in Buffalo. You've been here for some time. You know, what are you currently working on, and how do you continue to develop and refine your craft?
Firstly, go Bills. Second, yes, I am in Buffalo now. I'm a huge Bills fan. And how do I continue to work on my craft? I'm constantly modifying and changing my skills. I think that's really important. During the pandemic, obviously, everything shut down, and I so I started going more into radio production, and it's still the same. You know, I'm still directing talent, I'm still recording, I'm still editing, but I'm learning different skills. And I think it's just so important to continue to learn and continue to broaden your horizons in the industry. So uh, that was one thing I did during the pandemic. And then at the same time, I've always been a theatre writer. Theatre is my passion, but obviously there was no theatre during the pandemic. So I decided to branch out into television writing, which is an entirely different skill. And I spent a good portion of the pandemic creating a television series, which is a comedy about cancer. And I learned so much. It's so different. I learned how to do pitch decks. I learned how to, get a whole bunch of actors together from all over the world. And we did Zoom readings and workshops, and doing it virtually versus doing it face to face, and then learning how to direct people virtually, because it's so different. I mean, even now I'm talking to a screen. We're not energetically connecting. So figuring out how to do that with your words versus, just on a screen. So, sorry, that didn't make sense, but you know what I meant. So I constantly am trying to change and evolve and learn, and I'm going to make 1,000 mistakes, but I think that's the whole process. Is if you can learn all different areas of your field, then you're going to be better. And I think that that's one of the most important things you can do.
Well, I guess that goes to show you that you can literally be anywhere, whether it's New York, LA, Buffalo, Australia, and you could still work on things.
Well, that's exactly what I was doing. Is my network is in Australia. I don't know anyone in Buffalo. I mean, I know you, Rigatoni.
Well,
But
for all those listening out there, Rigatoni happens to be one of many nicknames that I go by.
so I used my network in Australia, and I was able to connect with a great producer named Lee, and we worked together virtually on Google Docs or whatever we could, and then we eventually got this great reading together with some amazing Australian actors that some of which are really quite well known, and we wouldn't have been able to get had there not been a global pandemic and everyone was stuck at home and bored. And then through that, it was the same thing. I was able to make some good connections quite high up at the networks there, and got the opportunity to pitch and meet some great people through that. So yeah, you can do anything. That's the great thing. And you know what? It has always been like that, but we just didn't realize, because we just didn't have that time to be sit with ourselves and figure out technology. But you have always, and this is one thing I will say to people of Buffalo, you have always had the ability to get things produced outside of the country. You have, and you can. It's just a matter of looking for those opportunities. And I was fortunate enough in my career to be able to get plays produced around the world just because I tried. I just reached out, and I'd reach out to theatre companies and say, hey, I've got this production, or you'd submit to different things, and they go, oh yeah, cool, sure, we'll put that up. And I got some plays done in Dubai, New Zealand, a few in London, Ireland. I mean, it's just, all you have to do is put your work out there. And if it's if it's good, sometimes even if it's not that good, I've had a few not that good ones, then people are going to respond and hopefully put it up.
Well, that's a very eloquent way to put that. So I feel like we've already may have touched on this, but what do you want people to take away from this interview? What do you think people should know?
I think the most important thing is obviously to always lead with kindness in your field, because you never know what someone else is going through, and it's a really tough industry. My next thing would be, part of that is have respect for your peers that you're working with. To me, I was always taught, you show up early, you warm up, you're prepared, you're respectful, because that will help you get employed over and over again. So basically, do the work. I always say this, do the work and don't be a dick. you should be fine.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, Camilla Maxwell. Like it's so simple. It is so simple. But so many people, they just are like, well, I'm just going to show up, I'm prepared, and I'm going to be a dick, and they're going to keep employing me because, well, yeah, they will, maybe in Buffalo, but wouldn't it be nice to leave a great experience in everyone's, mind when you leave? And I think that's what we should all aim for. If you can change or help one person, you should. I think we all have different skills. So why not use them every now and again to help someone who might not have those skills, whether it be, editing reels. I know you edit reels, or, writing a monologue for someone, or doing a headshot for someone who might not be able to afford it. Whatever it is, it's a tough industry, so let's all come together, work together. And if we do that, then we all win, because we're all building each other up. And it's this teamwork makes the dream work mentality, which is another one of my mottos. Teamwork makes the dream work. Show up, do the work, don't be a dick. The end.
Excellent. Well, this concludes another episode of Small Talk with Tony. I want to thank my guest today. Thank you very much, Camilla, for taking time for some small talk.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's been awesome.
And thank you for joining us. You can check out the latest episodes at tonyvideo.com/smalltalk. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram, where you can get the latest news. See you next time.
Actions always find a way to shine brighter than the things you say.